everyone, welcome back to another video. So in the intro montage for this episode, I went ahead and crafted at least the main body for Russ's crankcase breather setup. So what are we doing? What is a crankcase breather setup? Why does it need to be on this car? All good questions, all valid questions. So on 2JZs, let me zoom you guys in a little bit. If you can see down in there, that electrical plug that the camera is focused on, hopefully, down in that area right there, you can see some of the titanium bolts. That is the factory oil pressure or oil level sensor. So it was a good thing to have on a factory car, but a car like Russ's, like mine, like any of these other highly modified Supras, well, you don't really need that sensor. It doesn't really give you any worthwhile information and data. So Powerhouse Racing, they sell a little adapter deal. So you can take the sensor off of the side of the oil pan and put a number 10 bung there to vent crankcase pressure and to give the engine another point of egress for blow-by and things like that to make its way out. So what the purpose of this can is A, aesthetically to mirror the catch can right there over on that side, but B, to provide kind of a reservoir and a path for that crankcase pressure to make its way out. Without venting the crankcase, you could run into issues with potentially pushing oil past seals, causing oil leaks, so on and so forth. So Russ asked me to come up with a can based upon the design criteria that he gave me that will allow him to run a line from the oil pan up to this can and then around and into the bottom of his intake tube here, mirroring, again, the fitting that's on the bottom of the intake tube currently. So this catch can, we'll call it, just for the sake of this video, will be a little bit different as far as the baffling setup compared to the normal catch cans that you guys have seen me build here in the past. The reason for that is because there will not be a filter on it, so I don't have to do kind of the crazy multi-tier baffling that I normally do on catch cans that have a vent on them. We can look at the Mark II as it has a can like what I'm describing. And if we look at the catch can up here, you can see I have this panel filter on the top side of it. And if we pull that filter out, with the filter out of the way, you can see the perforated baffle there. And there are two other baffles farther down in the can to cause any blow-by to be directed towards the bottom of the can as opposed to up and out of the filter. I do that so we avoid as much of the possibility as possible of having that waste oil blow out of the catch can and all over a nice engine bay. The last thing that you want with an engine bay that you have taken a lot of care in constructing and organizing and everything else is to have it coated in oil. So on a normal catch can, I do a pretty intricate baffle system, but since Russ's will not have a vent or any sort of a filter on it, I don't have to do exactly the same thing, but we will still do some baffling on the inside of it, and that'll actually be the next portion of this can after I cut one of the side panels. time to build the baffle setup for Russ's can. So I put this panel right here on this side and took the top off so I can get in and gain access to weld this. And I also marked out where the number 10 bung is going to be located. So that will give me a reference so I can build a baffle that will be structured like this. So what I'm going to do is run the baffle kind of down at an angle like that. It will be probably about half of the width of this can, and then have a wall on this side, something like that. So this obviously isn't the best representation right now, but if you picture a wall right here, half of this can is going to be open, so that way anything coming into it will hit the wall, gravity will feed it down, this wall will end, so there'll be maybe some bit of a gap like between my index finger and the side of the can. And then from there, everything will come down to the bottom of the can, and the outlet of this will be on this lower corner, something like that. So this can more or less is a pass-through from that crankcase, where the crankcase fitting will be, to where the intake fitting is going to be. I think that will be perfectly fine and perfectly effective for this, and I guess we'll see in the long term. Now that I've welded the baffle in Russ's can, I can showcase and illustrate a little bit better what I was talking about before. So the baffle, like I said, it makes up about half of this upper section of the can, comes down at an angle, and in this area it has this cutout so any waste oil can make its way down here, loop around, and then go to the lower section of the can. So that cross here right there is where the inlet fitting will be. That cross here right there is where the outlet fitting will be. And I think this will work out pretty nicely for a sealed can, one that doesn't have any sort of a filter or venting other than the outlet of it. So at this point, I can go ahead, take my remaining two panels, get them put back on here, tacked into place and all of that. And then we can weld all of this together, although I am going to drill at least the pilot holes for the inlet and the outlet, so that way as the can gets closer to being fully welded, and especially when I'm doing the last little bit of the welding, I don't have any blowouts and don't end up destroying an electrode and or the gas lens that my cup is fastened to. Now that Russ's breather can is all welded together, it's time to get it mounted in the car. So the end result of the can, at least so far, I'm pretty happy with. So we have number 10 inlet bung, number 10 outlet bung, and this can is going to sit right in here in front of the clutch master, and that leaves us with a few options as far as mounting locations and where the tabs can go to. So we have one M8 threaded hole in the chassis right there. There's an M8 stud down here, right where I'm touching. And there's also an M6 threaded hole right here. So I think I'm going to make use of those 3 locations. As I've talked about many times on here before, anytime you're mounting a can, if you want it to be rigid or solidly mounted, you need at least 3 points of contact. And that's what we're going to go for right here. So first, I will locate this can based off of this threaded hole, and then that will keep everything kind of nice and solid in place where it needs to be, so I can build the other 2 tabs as easily as possible. With the 2 mounting tabs, Russ's crankcase breather can is completed. So, like I talked about earlier, normally I like to use 3 points of contact for cans like this. But with this can and how everything sits in here, this thing is rock solid and it really doesn't need a 3rd tab, so I'm not going to put one on it. So the last thing that needs to happen with this crankcase breather setup is on the bottom of Russ's intake tube, I need to put another number 10 male bung. That is ordered, it is not here right this moment. So until it comes in, I'm kind of at a forced stopping point, at least on Russ's car. But one thing I am going to do is to pull the fuel pump mounting bracket out of the SC, and I had my P-clamps arrive so I can actually mount the fuel filter, the pre-pump fuel filter that is, to the mounting bracket. So if you are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about when I refer to P-clamps, I'm talking about these guys right here. You may have seen them at your local home improvement store, but what they are is just a simple stainless clamp with a rubber insulator isolator deal on them. And you use these to mount cables, to mount hoses, to mount a variety of things like that. With the way that the SC's fuel pump bracket is constructed, I really want to put 2 of these clamps on the pre-pump fuel filter, just so that way it is retained as well, and we're not just dangling it in mid-air and putting all of that stress from the vibration of the pump and everything else on the number 12 fitting that links the filter to the pump. So with 2 of these, I can support that fuel filter from both sides, and I bought 3 different sizes as I wasn't sure exactly what I needed to make this work, but we'll figure out one way or another some way to put this all together. But first, let me go ahead and pull that bracket out, and then we can get to figuring the rest of this out. The last piece for Russ's car has arrived. Something small, something simple, but something that needed to be ordered in, and now it's here. That is this number 10 male AN bung. And what this is going to do is provide a path of egress from the crankcase breather can into Russ's intake tube. So you can see on the bottom there, he has one AN line running up to it currently. That is what exits out of his regular catch can there. And he asked me to put another number 10 bung on the bottom of the intake tube so that way the crankcase breather can go over to it as well. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Just have to drill a hole, place this bung, and then weld it on there. So let's go ahead and get to it, get this knocked out, and get this project all wrapped up. With the second number 10 bung welded onto the bottom of Russ's intake tube, his car is now completed, at least with this round of modifications in this round of additions, and I'm very happy with the way that everything came out. So now, with this bung here, Russ has the ability to connect the breather can all the way over to that, and to keep oil from going all over his engine bay, and so on and so forth. So with that being said, and with the cutout completed as well as you guys saw in the previous episode, Russ's car is a wrap at this point in time. So in the very near future, I will take his car back to him, I'll bring my car back down here, and then we can play around with some of the Haltech setup, getting the dash configured the way that I want it to be, so on and so forth. All of the cool stuff that goes into setting up the foundation, setting up the groundwork for that car and that display and everything to be exactly the way I want it to be. I can't wait to get started on it, and I foresee quite a few hours being spent just playing around with the dash layout and getting everything dialed in precisely as I'd like it to be. But with all of that being said, and again with Russ's car completed, I think that will be about the end of this episode. So thank you guys, as always, for coming along on all these different journeys and all of these different adventures with me. We had a couple of pretty cool, pretty neat projects to knock out on Russ's car. The cutout I'm very, very happy with, and I hope that he's happy with it as well when he finally gets to see it, and most importantly to hear the car uncorked and sounding very aggressive and very wild. But with Russ's car being completed, we still have the fuel system to work on for the SC. I have the tank, and that's kind of where we left off with this thing, was knocking out the rest of the work for the sump, but we still have to knock out the breather, the return, get some fresh paint on it, so on and so forth, and then most importantly get it reinstalled into the car so I can figure out all of the materials necessary to actually plumb the new fuel system for this thing. So for you guys, that'll be next week. For me, that will be just in a few moments after I do another round of car shuffling. But we have that to look forward to, hearing that crazy Weldon pump whine and make all of its beautiful calamity. I can't wait for it, and I can't wait to take you guys along for that with me. But with all that being said, before I drone on any longer, that'll be the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, Check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way, including my brand new Multicam Black MCB collection. That will be releasing in the very, very near future. I think in the next episode we'll do a little bit of a teaser for what that entails, what the items look like, and everything else. But again, that'll be then. This is now, and we're done with this episode. So with all of that being said, that'll be the end of this one, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.